everyone! Here's a video on how to make a country-style apple pie with a homemade all-butter pie crust that's super easy. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave any comments down below. So let's get started. First, let's get our kitchen scale and tar our bowl. Special thanks to the parents for the KitchenAid scale as a gift. Now we're going to cut up our apples and measure them for 1.5 pounds. And for the non-US folks, that's about 680 grams. For this pie, we're using Mutsu Crispin apples that we picked from a local farm where we live. But feel free to use your favorite apples. And once our apples are diced and cored, let's add them to the measuring bowl. Now that we've got 1.5 pounds, or about 680 grams, of apples measured, let's put the bowl aside. For our all-butter pie crust, let's get our all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, and salted butter ready. First, let's dice up our butter into tiny cubes. We're going to need 1 cup, or about 225 grams, of butter. And we're using salted butter. We're going to keep the butter in the fridge to keep it cold while we work on the rest of the pie. Let's take 2.5 cups, or about 300 grams, of flour and add it to our bowl. Let's also add 2 teaspoons of sugar. Now we're not adding any salt since our butter is already salted. Let's mix the flour and sugar together. After this, we'll need to prepare some ice water. Add about half a cup of water in a measuring cup. That's about 118 milliliters. And let's fill the rest of the measuring cup with ice. Let's also grab our butter out of the fridge. First, we'll add our butter to the flour mixture. And we'll just use 2 forks to work in the butter. Once the butter is worked in, we'll add in 2 tablespoons or 30 milliliters of the ice water to the bowl. And we'll just keep working in the flour with the ice water with the forks. Now we'll add in another 2 tablespoons or 30 milliliters of ice water. We'll just keep working in the ice water into the flour and butter mixture. And now we'll add in 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar into the mix. And for the non-US folks, this will be 30 milliliters. After this, keep adding the ice water. We added a total of 10 tablespoons of ice water and 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. That's 150 milliliters of ice water and 30 milliliters of apple cider vinegar. After a bit, I drop the forks and use my hands to get the mix into a dough-like form. Just keep mashing the mix together and eventually the flour will stick. Once the dough is more compact, we can divide it in half and wrap it in some saran wrap. It's best to chill the dough for at least 2 hours before using. So once we've wrapped them, let's put them in the fridge to cool. After a couple hours, we can prep the pie crust. And this time, we're using a 9-inch pie pan. So let's flour our workstation and start rolling out the crust. It's a little hard at first, but once you start working the dough, it'll get easier to roll out and measure for the pan. Here, we'll just roll out the crust onto the pan to make it easier to transfer to the pie pan. And it's okay if there's a tear like the one you see here. We can always mush the pieces together to make it whole again. See? All better. Now let's add in our cut up apples. We didn't use the full 1.5 pounds because our pie pan was too small. So please adjust the amount of apples based on how small you cut them and how big your pie pan is. Then, with our other half of the pie crust, we'll roll it out and cut 8 strips. And with the longest strips, we'll add them to the center of the pie, and the rest on the sides with 4 strips horizontal and 4 strips vertical. Now we're not the best at this lattice top crust thing on the pie, but if you Google it, I'm sure there are better instructions out there on how to do this. And now, we're crimping the edges with a fork and cutting off the excess crust with a knife off the edge of the pan. And now onto the good stuff. We'll need half a cup of butter, or 113 grams for the non-US folks, added to a saucepan. Now it's time to melt the butter in the saucepan. Once the butter is melted, we'll add 3 tablespoons of flour and make a roux. That's about 23 grams of flour into the butter. Now we switch to a whisk, and once it's mixed in, we added half a cup of granulated sugar and half a cup of brown sugar. That's about 113 grams each of granulated sugar and brown sugar. We kept switching between the spatula and the whisk, but please feel free to use whatever utensil you like. Now mix it up a little bit and let's add in about a 1/4 cup or 59 milliliters of water. And we'll just mix it in and bring it to a boil until it looks caramelly. And now we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon or about 1.4 grams of nutmeg and half a teaspoon or about 2.8 grams of cinnamon to the pot. And now we'll just stir it in until the spices are combined into our butter caramel mixture. And now let's add in the caramel. You could have mixed in the apples with the caramel before adding the top crust, but we weren't thinking, so we added them in through the holes. And depending on how you cut up your apples, you may need to make 2 batches of the caramel to add into your pie. And now, in a preheated oven of 425 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 218 degrees Celsius, let's bake the pie for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, change the oven temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 177 degrees Celsius, and bake for 35 minutes. And there you have it, a homemade country-style apple pie. Hope you guys enjoyed!